Hi, and welcome to the 30th anniversary show of the Flying Focus Video Collective, the 30th Busiversary. I'm PC Peri, and I co-founded Flying Focus in 1991. Most of what I do is recording in the field, events, lectures, protests, and interviews, which I've been able to continue during the pandemic. I'm joined today by a few other collective members. As part of the COVID safety procedures, they are dialed in remotely from other parts of the city.
Thanks, PC. I'm Dan Handelman, and while I'd love to be there in the studio with you, I think we've got this online production figured out after 19 months of lockdown rules. As for me, I also co-founded the group in 1991 during the so-called Gulf War, when community members wanted to show the activism going on to oppose that massacre, despite the mainstream media's near total blackout of the movement.
As you will see in this year's shows, we cover all sorts of topics which are interrelated, including war and peace, racial justice, the environment, police accountability, and healthcare. Of the 12 shows we made this year, I recorded the video for 7 of them, some as long as 2 years ago.
You will see clips from 24 episodes that we produced between November 2020 and October 2021, including 5 that I recorded video for. We use the Busiversary every year to explain to our viewers what we found important about these shows and to show that we're just ordinary people making video for social change, something you can do too.
Now that we've been around for 30 whole years, I can hardly believe it. We created roughly 1,000 shows. Many of them, including 29 previous Busiversaries, can be found online at our website, www.flyingfocus.org, and on YouTube.
If you want to join Flying Focus, support us, or give us feedback on our shows, call us at 503-239-7456 or call or text 503-321-5051. You can also email us at ffbc@flyingfocus.org.
We continue to push for values of equality, justice, and peace, offering you alternative viewpoints. Meanwhile, we see many Americans sliding into old patterns after a year of Black Lives Matter uprisings. We feel our educational videos are necessary to foster dialogue and understanding rather than anger and division. Now we'll start watching clips from this year's shows. PC Peri is speaking to Barb, and the Busiversary has been here for 30 years. We've been doing this. Barb has been here for 26. I cannot believe that. Oh, so we're supposed to be talking about what we did about multicultural issues. What part do you remember, Barb?
This first program is A Taste of Juneteenth. And PC, you want to tell people what Juneteenth is all about?
Juneteenth is when the enslaved people from Africa on this continent were told that they were free. They did not get 20 acres and a mule. And it was, if I remember correctly, nearly 2 years after the actual information was decreed.
When he went out to Zanger Farms and interviewed Rochelle Dixon. And in these clips here, he talks about farming and nutrition.
The average age of a farmer right now is 58. And as you get older, I'm here to tell you that things begin to ache. And most farmers never retire, but they don't put out the production that we need for a growing society, meaning we'll have to import more and more of our food. That means that there's a higher carbon footprint. We're using a lot more energy to get the food here. The food quality isn't as good because it's been packaged and shipped thousands of miles, and it's not as nutritious because over the time that it's being shipped or stored, it starts to lose its nutritional value. So having farmers right here on our soil and in our state make sure that we always have high quality food available to us at a reasonable rate.
I want to get the context of how you are a vegan and why you are not a meat eater.
Oh, well, I feel like for my survival, and actually for the survival of the African Americans, that we need to stop eating a colonized diet. And so I've tried to go back to a decolonized diet when we were a little bit healthier. So now we're suffering from things like diabetes and high blood pressure, obesity, and many of these things can cause other diseases, fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, and then you get heart disease. So I want to go back to a basic diet where we're eating the fruits and the vegetables and nuts, but we're not putting heavy sauces on things. We're not putting sugar, butter, all those things. And for me, just eliminating the meat was the easiest way to align my values with the world. So we know climate change is happening. What's the temperature today? We know that the state of medical care for African Americans is not good. COVID, one of the unfortunate realities is it affected African Americans more. A lot of that had to do with diet and vitamin D deprivation, because we're not in places where we can get the right amount of sun.
Barb is back with her artistry of editing and took the footage that I recorded having to do with Native Americans and people of color speaking out in downtown Portland. Barb, what do you remember from this?
I remember this is the 4th of July, and I was struck by how different the view of 4th of July is between white people and Native American and people of color, which really shows up in this clip.
Are we talking also about the people who stood on street corners bringing attention to Black Lives Matter as traffic went by?
Yes, they're there too. It was amazing how so many people were out on the street week after week after week, because the importance of this issue is finally coming to light last year.
To remind people, especially white people, of the violent history of the land you are on. You are here today standing on the dead backs of men, women, two-spirits, non-binary people, and children. There is indigenous blood oozing out of every step you take. Bloodshed not by us, but by racist colonizers who viewed us as game to hunt. I am also here to tell you that this is not history. This is our lives now. Indigenous American women have a 1 in 3 chance of being raped in their lifetime. Indigenous American men have the highest suicide rates in the country. This genocide is not over. If you do not see what is happening, it is because you choose not to. Black people have had to endure rape, murders, lynchings, police brutality, and cultural theft since they were first stolen from their own indigenous lands on the African continent. Black people were forced into slavery, building the foundations of what the country is today. You are walking today on the backs of dead Black women, men, children, non-binary, and two-spirit people. We as Black and Indigenous people have been fighting for our lives and safety for over 500 years. This event today is a show of Indigenous support for Black Lives Matter. We're here to uplift Afro-Indigenous people and to stand in solidarity with Black people across all continents. Black liberation and Indigenous solidarity are intrinsically linked. There is no Black liberation without Indigenous sovereignty. There is no Indigenous sovereignty without Black liberation.
Whose lives matter? Black lives matter. Whose lives matter? Black lives matter. What do we want? Justice! Justice for who? George!
This is about the justice system and reform for education. So we spoke to folks at two different locations, and they, in the first one, a young man bringing his attention to the community during not so great weather. The second location was mainly speakers talking about what they were and were not going to ask for. And I think one of the best interviews that we've done in a while.
When our taxes is going to police officers to where they're getting way too much money, and for especially doing a job that they're not qualified to do. I mean, if you look at it, I went to barber college years ago. My barber college training was way longer than a police officer's training, which is crazy to me. I don't understand that. So I think anytime you get a citizen calling for help for their child that has a mental illness problem, I don't think a police officer should be coming to that call. Some of that money needs to be going to counselors. They should be the first ones that come to that call.
They call you boy.
They call you what? Boy.
Boy. I stay out the way. I just do my own thing. I work hard, 14, 15 hours a day. I don't.
I think Parker got it.
I try to provide for my family. I got people back home that I take care of, so I just try to do me and stay in my lane.
That's
enough. But you know, it comes to you. It ain't like y'all looking for it, you know what I mean? This shit at your front door. You go to the grocery store, motherfucker. It's something than what it shouldn't be.
Have you figured out what's at the basis of why they act like that?
Yeah, I feel like it's I think it's that TV channel that they watch. So I go do these $1 million homes, set them up, and I go there, and sometimes the people there, and they listen to like Rush Limbaugh or somebody talking about black people, and they believe it. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy how much influence this white man got on my life. And I had to hit myself to what they was thinking by listening to this shit, and I'm like, wow.
You try and change your mind?
No, I can't. I can't. Only thing I can show you is that that's not true. I'm not going to change your mind about a conversation I'm going to have with you.
Racism is just like history. It's taught to you. It's taught? It's taught. You're not born racist. It's something that is bred into your well-being. That's just how it is.
Yeah, I really like those guys. They're thoughtful, hardworking. They can see the issues, and they're not letting it get them down.
Thank you, Barb. And now here's Dan to tell us about his productions.
I am Dan Handelman, yes. And this year I produced 6 programs, and I edited part of all 12 shows. It's kind of natural that as a member of Portland Cop Watch, 3 of my shows focus on police accountability. The first one you'll see is about the Training Advisory Council, a body that's been meeting since 2012, but I don't think there have been cameras there covering full meetings, that is, until Zoom. I believe our program is the first video to cover the group in depth. One of the TAC's main charges is to hear quarterly reports on use of force by the Portland Police. Here you'll hear Lieutenant Nia sidestepping some important issues, including the racial disparity, where a black population of just 6% receives between 25 and 30% of officer use of force. The council also advises the Bureau about training, and there's a discussion about bringing in community members to tell police their point of view. Surprisingly, Lieutenant Stewart is sympathetic to the concern that people don't want to have to relive their traumatic experiences over and over again. For what it's worth, both the officers you're going to see have troubled pasts and have both retired already, even though these meetings were held only about a year ago.
I have been working on the protests, much like most of the officers have. I've had literally 5 or 6 days off since Memorial Day, and my job duties have not revolved around the force, looking at the force for the most part. I apologize. I do not have a good answer for what the annual report looked like from 2018. Custody percentages here, we break this out by male, female, and race, and you can see that again we have a large percentage of the custodies and force being used on white males, and then the breakdown further from there. The unknowns, I don't know where those came from. I would suspect that might be a scribbler's error where someone failed to mark something on a report and we just didn't capture it.
Earlier, you heard Lieutenant Nia talk about the force-to-custody ratio, which is how the Portland Police measure the use of force instead of use of force versus the percentage of people in a population.
With some of the community voice, I've been working really hard. We had a lot of success with the Youth Educating Police program that Britt was involved, particularly the front-end video that they produced.
I like the idea of the videos. I work, in my pocket of the world at my agency. I'm one of the few people of color and have been tasked with conducting a lot of the anti-racism trainings and that sort of thing. And so it resonates for me how people of color sometimes are then tasked with the burden of also doing the emotional labor of talking about what it feels like to be on the inequitable end of things. And I like the idea of incorporating the community voice, and I want to honor and respect the community that they don't have to basically wound themselves publicly so people will take their pain seriously. And so I'm all for a well done video that then you can roll out without having to expend some of that heart pain.
I totally appreciate what you say about for community members, it's got to be exhausting. How we used to do it, you come in, there might be 50 police officers in that classroom. And if you already have somebody that's got trauma related to that, there's no way we can ask them to come in for 20 sessions and do that. It wouldn't be ethical.
My second police accountability show is about the Citizen Review Committee, which hears appeals about officer misconduct. When the chief disagrees with the CRC's recommendations, the case heads to City Council for a vote. Spoiler alert, for the first time in the history of Portland's oversight boards, the mayor, who's the police commissioner, voted to agree with CRC and sustain the allegation against the officer. In this case, it wasn't a very major issue. The officer refused to take a stolen car report from a woman who had just taken ownership and couldn't produce the documents the cop wanted to see because the DMV had them. She lost her car as a result. Portland voted to get a new oversight system in November 2020, but it probably won't start up until 2023 or later. What you'll see here are parts of 4 hearings that were held. The first was pre-COVID in 2019. I recorded it inside City Hall with my video camera. The second and third were at CRC meetings held over Zoom. The council hearing was in April 2021 and went out over Open Signal PCM's government channel.
There are 2 appealed allegations. The first is that Officer A would not take a vehicle theft report from appellant. The finding on that was exonerated. And the second is that Officer A did not adequately document a missing vehicle reported by the appellant, and that finding was unfounded.
The real distinction here is whether the piece of paper that was provided, and I believe that could have been what was provided. It is handwritten. It's not a bill of sale, but it is written in hand. It's not typed out. To me, I looked at it and it was kind of an either or. That's what was provided. Does that provide the officer a basis to take a stolen report based on our policy?
I was thoroughly briefed on this, read through the summaries, and where I came down in this situation, looking at all the facts, is I landed on a not sustain with a debrief. I know the previous was exonerated and then the CRC finding was sustained, but I came in with not sustained with the debrief. And the reasoning is, I feel like with what was presented to the officer at the time, he would not have been able to actually verify proof of ownership and be in a position where he could have taken that stolen report.
The detective who was brought in to sort of be the expert on like DMV procedures and stolen vehicle procedures said that appellant should have had a copy of the title to go along with the notice of transaction submitted form. The form itself is not proof of ownership and cannot be used as a standalone document. I don't understand how she would possibly be able to have a copy of the title, because the whole point of the notice of transaction submitted is that you're waiting for the title. So that kind of calls into question, from my perspective, the credibility of this expert that was brought in.
I think the language is clear, the way I interpret it. And I may be interpreting it not the way it was intended, but that's, I read that sentence as a definitive, clear statement of procedure. And it says, without that proper documentation, the officer has an affirmative duty to do X, which is contact a supervisor.
In the absence of that information, we should err on the side of going, making clear we follow procedure.
My last show on police accountability was a collaboration with Jasmine, a co-host on KBOO Community Radio. We looked at 3 sets of data tracked by Portland Cop Watch. Most of the show covers the settlements paid out by the city in response to lawsuits, and specifically the top 25 highest payouts. Many of these are people who were shot and or killed by Portland police. The other data are a webpage about officers involved in deadly force incidents since Cop Watch started, and a list of all deadly force incidents in Oregon over 10 years. In the first half of the clips, I'm talking about the difference between negligence cases and overt acts of misconduct. And in the second part, I describe the specifics of the case of Quantas Hayes, who was killed in 2017, and whose family received a settlement earlier this year. I was glad to have Jasmine as a co-host because she moved from the details of the specific cases to broader questions raised by the actions that led to the spending of taxpayer money.
It's a very different kind of misconduct than actively violating people's civil rights by beating them up or killing them, or some of the other things that are in the top 25 of the list, or some of these other cases where what they did was, and I'll give you an example of something we saw happening over and over again, was lay down spike strips to try to stop a suspect from traveling that they're chasing, and they stopped the wrong car and damaged the person's tires. And I think that, that's, it's a form of negligence, but I think it's misconduct in the sense that they aren't targeting only the person that they're trying to apprehend. That's inappropriate.
Just reading through the numbers, and granted, it's over a long period of time, so it's not necessarily happening every day, but you get this sense, reading through the numbers and the brief descriptions of the property damage and other things that happened, you really get the sense of just a group of people just sort of like rampaging through private property, breaking fences, just destroying things, breaking cars, breaking windows in cars.
The second highest amount that we had listed there was Quantas Hayes. He mentioned people call him Moose. He was allegedly going around in a neighborhood and threatening people in their cars, and the police chased him to a neighborhood, and they asked him to come out from this garage area, and he crawled out on his hands and knees, and they asked him to get up, and when he got up, he adjusted his pants because they were probably falling down. They thought he was going for a weapon, and they shot and killed him.
I guess I just wonder, what more proof do we need that they have violated the contract that was made, that they are, or that maybe they haven't violated the contract, that they're actually functioning with the same carelessness and with the same privilege that they've been functioning with from the beginning, and that, they're protecting the property of people other than the people whose houses that they're breaking into, that they're protecting the lives of other than the people that they're shooting to death, that they're, that they're not going to learn, that they don't want to learn.
That wraps it up for part 1 of the 30th Busiversary. I'm Dan Handelman of Flying Focus Video Collective, and we appreciate those of you who joined us today.
I'm PC Peri, and I want to emphasize that we can always use more people at the collective. To learn more about Flying Focus or to volunteer, give us a call at our office, 503-239-7456. You can also write to ffbc@flyingfocus.org. There's voicemail, which also works for texting at 503-321-5051.
Showtimes listed there are also on the website with current program information. I want to say we miss recording these shows at Open Signal Portland Community Media Studios all together with a full crew. We want to thank the staff for supporting today's production. Other than PC, me, and Barb, today's show is being directed by Moss Drake, who has also been part of the group from the beginning.
Hi, everyone.
And if you wonder how we're supported, aside from some equipment grants from Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, most of our funding comes from donations, including for digital copies of our shows.
We want to thank everyone for making these past 30 years of video activism possible, especially you, the viewers. Thank you for watching. Tune in next week at the same time for part 2 of the 30th Busiversary.